we know that there's a lot of bias. We know that there's a lot of disparate insight that comes out of generative AI tools, which is why it's so important that so many of us get involved. But I think that part of the work that I can do as a female over the age of 50 is just continue to share that we don't have to feel like we're less than, that everybody is starting this journey, even every single person. Most of the people that you know are going to have just started this journey at the earliest in November or December of 2022.
Welcome to the Made Leader Podcast, where exceptional leadership isn't about who you are, but who you choose to become. Join your host, Jen Arnold, for expert interviews, real-world stories, and practical advice that transforms managers into exceptional leaders. If you're a middle manager ready to unlock your potential, this is your podcast. Let's get started.
Hey there, and welcome to the Made Leader Podcast. I'm your host, Jen Arnold. It feels like everyone's talking about AI lately, but I know there's a large discrepancy in how leaders and organizations use it, if they use it at all. Now, if you are still figuring out what to do with AI beyond polishing emails, you are not alone. And that's why I wanted to invite today's guest, Theresa Fesinstine, to talk all about AI in organizations, in HR, and of course, in leadership. Let me tell you about Theresa. Theresa is a strategic force at the intersection of artificial intelligence and human resources. With over 25 years in executive HR leadership, she now leads the charge in translating AI into clear, actionable solutions for non-technical professionals. As the founder of People Power AI, she equips organizations to move beyond buzzwords and start using AI to solve real business problems, elevate talent strategies, and future-proof their workforce. Now, if you've ever felt that twinge of vulnerability asking who the hell is Claude or what is ChatGPT, this conversation is for you. You're going to discover practical steps for you to take as a leader beyond basic AI use. But Theresa also offers suggestions on basic AI use. We talk very candidly about whether AI will save you time as a middle manager or if it's going to take your job. And we'll learn why creating a people-first, AI-forward approach might be the sweet spot for your team. That's definitely the approach that Theresa uses and she talks about today. So whether you're an early adopter of AI or you're still AI curious, this discussion cuts through the hype to help you figure out what AI means for your leadership journey, both today and who knows about the future. We really got nothing there because who knows what's going to happen. But before we dive into my conversation with Theresa, I want to tell you about a leadership opportunity for new leaders. It's called the Made Leader Community, and it starts June 2nd. The Made Leader Community gives you access to practical tools, regular coaching sessions, and a network of peers who are navigating the same challenges as you. It's real-world leadership development for new managers who need support right now. Not just theory, not just a 1-hour workshop, but actual real-life situations, support that you can use for 3 months, and you'll walk away with feeling like a more confident leader. All the details will be linked up in the show notes, but you can go to growsignals.co and find the Made Leader community. Hope to see you there. Now, without further ado, here's my conversation with Theresa Fesinstine. Theresa, welcome to the Made Leader Podcast. I'm so glad to have you on today.
Thank you, Jen. I couldn't be more thrilled and excited to be here with you.
Well, we just started talking about AI off air. We could have talked for a while.
Yes.
But, you do the work in the trenches with the people in HR, right? You also teach college students as well. But when you talk to HR and organizations in general, what is their general approach to AI? What are their concerns? What are the conversations happening at that level?
Yeah. It's actually been quite an interesting evolution over the past few years from this sort of frenzied, early adopters who were just like, hey, bring me anything. It was like the shiny shiny, sparkly thing in the corner. Over the past 3 years, now it's really getting to a place where I'm finding more and more teams are looking for not just a tick the box solution like, "Oh, hey, we wanna do a one-off thing here," or do you have some resources? It's really these organizations that I've talked to are starting to get much more forward-looking, much more, um analytical around, or diagnostic, I guess is the right word, around how they're leveraging or thinking about leveraging AI. And I think it's actually a really strong pattern to see that instead of let's jump in first, sort of the shoot, fire, aim philosophy, that now where companies are starting to slow down. There's obviously been a lot of stories in the news about how different companies are adopting AI. The companies that I've talked with and the HR teams that I partner with are becoming a lot more intentional about what does this look like and can we actually build something together, which is, as a solopreneur, as somebody who's building my own business, I think there is this um really nice character of being able to say, what does great look like to you? And then working together to figure out how we can make that great work
Mhm.
cohesively.
So what I heard from you is a lot of early adopters that were coming in, just teach us how to use it. And now they're saying, okay, how can we actually customize and build something for our organizations? But at a basic level, are organizations, do they have policies in place on how, AI can be used in the organization? Is it like it's just here, we don't need to put a policy in place, or a mix of both? What do you see around that?
No, I think it's a little bit of both. I don't see that the companies that don't have so I have been too long in HR to continue to use the word policy, especially around something like AI. I think, if anything, and those who know me have heard me say this before, COVID, if it taught us anything, it was agility, and really, AI is going to force us in a similar outcome, very different reasons, but to be a little bit more dynamic in the way that we guide our employees. So I use the term roadmap or guidelines. And what I'm seeing in that area is that the companies that don't have them isn't necessarily because the company has come up with a decision around the fact that we're not going to have it. I think in a lot of cases, one department is waiting for another department who's waiting for another department to sort of lead the charge, or um, they have something in place, but it was written from a technical or legal lens. And so oftentimes in working with me, we're talking about, okay, how do we create a people focused lens around guidelines that support curiosity, but don't sort of harm the individual in the way that they are, or the company in what people are putting in. But I do think that there are still, when I run these workshops and I talk to hundreds of people and I ask them to raise their hand if they've got guidelines or a roadmap or a policy in place, there's still a lot of hands down.
Yeah. I could imagine there would be, and it's not like
Yeah,
it's like, "Don't use it." I mean, what organization, maybe there are
there
organizations that
are.
say, "Don't use it?"
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Like, certain industries, or what would be, I'm thinking of, like, national security, maybe something like that, but, like,
You know what? Yeah, well, I'm sure they haven't been knocking on my door, but, some of the other companies are, it could be that they deal with a really the bulk of their work is dealing with client information. So, I think the concern of, like, okay, because our employees may not actually be able to decipher what is our information versus what is client information, they're taking it a lot more granularly and a lot more slowly. Um any company that, even if it's obviously the medical field and the healthcare field, but any company that's dealing with patient type information or um, legal disputes or things like that. So law, medical, they might be taking it a little slower, but even your everyday company that operates just maybe feeling a little bit more concerned or really, really security minded, they might really limit the number of tools that their teams are able to use, if any at all.
yeah, well, that makes sense. I mean, that's legit. We can probably talk about data later. Where's it all going, right?
Mhm, mhm.
But do you see, on the flip side, people, or organizations, industries that more readily adopt it?
You know what, Jen? I can't really say like this is, overarchingly these companies are and these companies aren't. So I don't have like a real, these are the people that are really jumping forward fast. Because I work with HR teams, I'm industry agnostic. So I work with teams from the automotive industry to health and beauty to, everywhere in between. And I haven't seen like oh, wow, the bulk of my clients are coming from X. I really think HR leaders are trying to figure this out at their own pace, leveraging community conversations or leveraging workshops or things like that. And as they become more aware, they start to take their own, they put up the baton and they start to march forward and figure out how they can learn about tools like this. But I haven't seen that happen. I'm sure, you know, McKinsey or Deloitte or one of those great companies with a lot of resources to their avail could come up with a good answer for that. I should probably ask ChatGPT. Maybe it'll tell me.
Fellas, yeah. Well, one of the things I remember, I was in a culture first forum. Like, it had to be 2 years ago, but time is elusive to me, so it could have been
Yeah.
5 years ago. But I
Right?
really do feel like it was 2 years ago. I was in San Francisco, and I remember a lady from Charter. They had a paper, a research paper on who
Mhm.
uses AI, and they were talking about women over 40 in the workplace that were not using it and therefore could be left behind. Because when you think about, and that people like us, right?
Yep.
Who, if you don't want to say, I don't know how to use it, or I'm not sure how to use it, or, whatever like that. And that hit me kind of hard because I was like, okay, I need to up my game a little bit in this area. And I did have to feel stupid a time or two. So I'll tell on myself here. We were doing something with one of the other Culture First leads, and I gave them something, and they're like, I'm just going to put this in Claude and blah, blah, blah. I was like, who the hell is Claude? And I had to just say, I'm sorry, this is stupid, but who is it? And then it was AI, and now Claude's my best friend, right? So I had to ask something that felt very vulnerable and made me feel potentially stupid. So how do you talk about that in your workshops with HR? Is it that you educate them so they don't have to feel like they have to ask the stupid question in a larger group? Or is that anything that you've noticed?
I I'm gonna first thing I'm gonna say is to challenge ourselves to not call ourselves stupid.
It
Questions.
felt stupid. It wasn't just,
No,
I didn't know. You don't know what you don't know, but it's
totally.
still a
But why
feeling,
is there
right?
judgment around? I think that's the thing.
Because
It's
people
like,
are judgy.
right, but why are we so judgy about ourselves? My goodness. I think that there's a lot of truth. I'm a huge fan of Charter. I'm a pro member of Charter. It's a great organization. And great insights and reporting that they do on the world of HR and AI. I will say this, that statistic remains true, that, when you ask the question, I was really thinking about industry and not necessarily thinking about demographics. But there are, a lot of studies that show that women in general, women um, underrepresented for sure, men underrepresented, and in underrepresented groups, and so I think that there are discrepancies on who has been leaping forward in the way that they're looking to leverage AI. I will say this, women are predominantly featured as over 70% of HR leaders. And that's really a lot of what got me motivated in terms of education and helping support, given that I am a recently turned 51-year-old woman who's been in the working world in HR for over 25 years. In 2023, this is a little after I started my own AI journey in 22. But when I was talking about it, I was just getting crickets back. Nobody that I had formerly worked with was familiar. I'd ask it in social groups or in Slack channels about it in early 23, and it was like maybe one or two people were also mentioning it. It was very rare. And so I started to get concerned not just about HR, but about the females and the women in HR being represented in these tools that we use, and underrepresented people being represented. We know that there's a lot of bias. We know that there's a lot of um, disparate insight that comes out of generative AI tools, which is why it's so important that so many of us get involved. But I think that part of the part of the work that I can do as a female over the age of 50 is just continue to share that we don't have to feel like we're less than, that everybody is starting this journey, even every single person. Most of the people that you know are going to have just started this journey at the earliest in November or December of 2022. That's
Mhm.
that's that's for most of us how old we are. Now there are some people that definitely were working in artificial intelligence and natural language processing and machine learning prior to that. But for the most part, the people that you were hearing from, the people that you talk to every day, um, haven't been in the game that long. And so, for anybody who's feeling like, I feel silly, or I feel like I should know this, or I feel like I'm behind, I start every session with asking, how many of you have been using it every week or every day? How many of you have never used it? And when those group raise their hands, I celebrate them so wildly because to me, they're the best audience. They're going to learn the most and have the most wows, which is great for me as a facilitator. I love the great feedback, but I think there is something in exposing your delicate underbelly and saying, "Hey, I haven't really been in this." And my role as a facilitator is to say, that's absolutely okay. You don't have to have started from anywhere before you come in here today to learn, as long as you've got a curious mind for the learning.
You have to either go to a workshop that's very hands-on like yours to understand it, or you have to do your own work, or you have to be exposed. I was exposed to people who were talking about it, and that's what got me into it, and that's got me doing it every day now.
Mhm.
But yeah, it is it helps to ask those questions because then you learn things, right? But it feels vulnerable, and so I think I like that. They're not stupid questions, but you do feel vulnerable, but it's
Yes.
important still to bring it up.
Yeah. I mean, I feel vulnerable doing things all the time. I had my brother who's been in computers since high school and college. I mean, you know, he got his management information systems degree back in, he'd be upset with me, 90 maybe? I mean, he's been in it for a long, long time.
Mhm.
Um, so I think we struggled often in our relationship just because I didn't have context for what he was talking about,
Mhm.
and it wasn't something that, like, really felt in my purview. Then as I got into HR and started my role in learning, and then as a executive started adopting and making selections and bringing in different tools, there's something that I think came to me after I left in-house roles and got into AI. It's that I'd get sold these really shiny objects, these really cool tools, and the minute I was on my own with them with my team, it was like, I don't know how that works, like, I don't know how to do that. And so it became this, like, really expensive at times shiny object that I just, like, really ignored. And I think that stuck with me as I started thinking about teaching others, kind of getting back to my learning and development roots. But also, we all have had that feeling about something at some time, right? Like that kind of shiny object that we want to explore, but feel like we just can't do it. It's kind of like the same way I felt about math most of my life. It's like, it's just not my thing. Um, and and the reality is, for something like this, it doesn't take a real heavy lift to just get started. That doesn't mean you're going to be maximizing your utility or, leveraging it in the way that hiring somebody like myself might be able to help you do. But, the simplest thing you can do is open up a conversation go to chatgpt.com, open up a conversation and just start typing in the way you would to Google. Now, that's not gonna get you the best results, but it's gonna get you started.
Yeah, and there's so many different ones to experiment with. That's kind of the fun thing. Like my husband prefers Perplexity, and I prefer Claude, right? But
Mhm,
Perplexity helps me research things kind of better than Google, right? So
mhm,
I think experimenting really is important. But Teresa, we talk about it a lot, like from our lenses, from an organizational perspective, right? So what is the organization going to do? What's HR going to do? What vendors? Every vendor says they put AI in something, right? That's where I find the conversation happens. But when do managers come into the conversation? And
mhm,
I'm going to leave that there, but I'm going to say that I know there was one instance that I was talking to an HR person and their software, their engagement software, put in AI in performance reviews. And I was like, okay, so maybe that's how they're coming into AI. But do managers or leaders in the organization ever come into the conversation with how do they leverage it for their jobs?
I'm going to take a little bit of a step back. The first thing I want to take a step back on is, companies that are, a lot of organizations, enterprise level software SaaS tools are talking about leveraging AI when really we want to be very thoughtful about what that means. Um, they might be leveraging automation. They might be leveraging workflows that are already pre-built workflows. So, for example, that might come across as though you're able to query or question your insights within those tools, but most oftentimes what we're finding is that you're not actually being able to have a very organic and natural conversational AI, like generative AI conversation, but it is pre-formulating and building out the workflows to make it a little easier for you to work with the data. So I talk in my workshops and in working with companies a little bit about understanding some of the nuance of it, because every single company out there is like, we have AI now, we just launched AI. And when you really dig in and you say, okay, what type of artificial intelligence are you leveraging? What power does that give to my customer or your customer or my clients in their usage of these tools? And you realize that in a lot of cases, it's just sort of putting perhaps a new bow on, an old tool.
Yeah. And
That's
then let me
one thing to think
pause
about.
there because I think that's something too that if you don't know what questions to ask, right? Because if you don't know anything or you don't know much about AI, you could just say, "Oh, sounds good," nod and smile.
Sure,
But
totally.
knowing what questions to ask or having someone like you there to decipher what are they really putting in there, right?
Totally. And you don't even have to have me there. Quick plug for my book, People Powered by AI. And the only reason I bring that up, I am all about self-promotion, but
She
for a
is.
purpose.
It's legit.
For a
In a good
purpose.
way. I'm
Yes,
learning
for
from
a
you, Theresa.
I promise that I wrote this book for a very specific purpose, because not everybody is gonna be in a large city that has AI workshops all the time, or maybe they aren't aware of webinars or things that are happening just because of the way their network or the way that they use social tools. Um, but the book I created is about, like, what are the questions? There's literally a whole chapter on working with vendors and what questions do we ask and how do we vet the criteria that they're telling us we should believe in, as opposed to either giving us demonstrations specifically around and being able to speak to elements of artificial intelligence, generative AI, which is really the core that everybody's sort of talking about right now, right? You talk about different tools are not always the same. Perplexity is actually not the same type of tool as a Claude or a ChatGPT. They may work similarly, but that doesn't mean they're the same type and operate the same way, because they don't. I think that where managers come in, to kind of get back to that question, managers, I will say a few things about managers that I've said for a long time. Managers are probably the greatest unsung heroes of organizations. Uh, if you're in that really difficult middle space of not necessarily being at the executive decision making level, but you're also still having to direct a group of people, whether it be one person, 20 people, or 100 people, depending on your organization, there's so much insight that needs to be shared, in through lines. And so, number one, I've been in the role. I understand how challenging it is, and I really anchor and support you. I think when it comes to AI, there are numerous ways that managers could be using these tools and leveraging these tools, but I don't know that it is the first point of contact around education. So I think companies are starting to think bigger in terms of, okay, how are we training functions and not necessarily levels? Um, it's
What do you mean
interesting.
by that?
What I mean by that is that, like, let's talk to our let's talk to our marketing team and see how our marketing team, not necessarily our, graphic designers versus our digital art directors versus our senior art directors, right?
Yeah.
Or our HR team as opposed to our coordinators, our specialists, our directors, and so on. But I do think that doesn't mean there aren't functional ways that those managers can use. Some of the tools out there that, in my mind, managers should absolutely either have access to through their work or create their own access to is being able to build custom tools. So custom assistants is what I call them. What I say formerly known as bots, they're now assistants. And those assistants, that's known through ChatGPT as custom GPTs, through Gemini as gems, through Claude as projects. So they each have sort of different dynamics and different capabilities, but you can really lean in and share some of your own managerial insights. So let's say you work with a few direct reports and you've gone through a process like strength finders or DISC or predictive index, being able to pull some of that data, those data insights in about to improve the way that a manager works with their direct reports or improves the cohesiveness of their team all around. That's a really unique way to handle it. And to think through conversations, difficult or positive, it could be promotional and celebrations. It doesn't always have to be the tough things. And also thinking about, from a managerial perspective, how do you leverage these tools for things like promotion opportunities or really just advocating for yourself and your team? There's some really interesting ways you could go about using and leveraging AI for that as well.
So when you think about it, so there's a lot of talk about AI with managers specifically, and there's two trains of thought. We're going to go down both. One is that it's going to save so much time that, managers are going to be able to coach their people and, really spend time with their people. I personally don't believe that to be true, but that's my jaded perspective. I'll tell you why in a minute. The other one is that it's going to replace your job and you're not going to be needed anymore. So if we go on the positive slant, right? So the great benefits of AI, it's going to make middle managers' lives so much easier. What do you feel like is the difference? What's hype and what in your mind is reality?
I would be much more curious to start with why you don't think it's true.
Well, there was an article that came out, I think it was an HBR. I'll find it and look it up in the show notes. And they found that it saved people time, but they didn't, in some cases, it saved people time, right? But most of them did nothing, quote unquote, productive with it. So here's my jaded perspective.
Okay, let's get into the jade.
I feel as though if AI is going to save people time, managers specifically, organizations are not going to allot that time to coaching their people. They're going to get them to do more work. That is what I think is going to happen. And I'll tell you this, I was working with an employer. This was a few years ago. And they were it was during the pandemic. And they were talking about, oh yeah, well, we can do self-driving cars. And that way our people, I was just thinking, yeah, can like relax and think of great new ideas on their way. He's like, then we can get more productivity out of them. And that is exactly the mind of a CEO that I was dealing with. So I don't think the people are ever going to be a priority in the way of, you have this extra time, please go coach your people. Because I feel like our society is more productivity focused. That's my jaded view.
Ooh, Jen. Ooh, Jen. Oof. Ouch. Okay. Here's my thought on that. I think that there are moments where we are either directing or directed. And what we have ahead of us with AI creates a path where we could walk down either one of those paths. Now, there are companies right now that are choosing the path of, and I know we're not talking about the replacement yet, but they're choosing the path of, I don't think that what you're talking about of like, we're going to save time and we're going to be able to coach, we're going to do those things that we want to do. I would play counterpoint to that. I think that in most cases, we have to direct the way our time is going to be used. If we find moments that matter because we're more efficient with our process and we show value for those moments that matter, I don't imagine a CEO that's worth his salt or her salt is going to, or their salt is going to say, don't do that anymore.
It depends how
But
you define value. Sorry, didn't mean to interrupt, but it depends to me how you define value. And so a value for a leader, maybe I had a great coaching conversation, that person's performance is coming up, to whereas, someone else may say, well, what was the ultimate tangible outcome, right?
I think you're right. Value is going to mean different things to different organizations. I And I'm not gonna say that every company is gonna get upside value in the soft and fuzzy, we're gonna be able to coach our people. And I don't think all of the value lies in coaching. I think a lot of the value lies in you're gonna be able to prioritize greater outcomes from the projects that you are working on faster, efficiently. That doesn't mean that you're filling a tactical void with time off. I think that there are group companies that are gonna do really well, that are people first, that are going to find productive culture building purpose in the time that is saved through the efficiency of AI. Are all companies people first? Absolutely not. And those
Yeah, but you
companies won't.
Yeah, and you raise a good point that it's not always, it can be maybe you're getting out of the busy work and you're able to be more strategic with the projects, right? And that so it's not all people focused. But that's the common complaint, right? Is you don't have enough time, you're in the weeds, you've got all these
Mhm.
competing things going on. So I guess it's like, you know, how can it make your life easier? It makes my life easier as a business
You
owner, right?
Well, sure, but think about this, like, when you're thinking about and when most people today are thinking about how they're leveraging AI, and forgive me, and I don't mean to seem condescending when I say this, but a lot of people are still using sort of AI at the 2% range of like it's modifying an email, it's updating. I'm talking about when you talk about real efficiency, it's getting into an organization, understanding their workflows, and then creating automation behind those workflows so things can happen faster. Once things happen faster, you're able to act on those things, make decisions faster, leverage the data from that information faster. So take even just one process. And I use employee engagement a lot because we have companies that help us with employee engagement data, and we're gathering all this data. And it takes so damn long for that data to become something productive, if it ever is, and if it ever does. But with the it's I'm talking about a systemic change around how we gather insights. So instead of asking 15 Likert scale questions that give us, a rating scale of kind of nothing, it's really difficult to assess what a 2 means to everybody and get everybody on the same page as to what a 5 is or so on and so forth. You get kind of eliminate those or get rid of those except for 1 or 2 around ENPS, just so at least you have some sort of numeric. But focus primarily on the meaningful insights, the things that employees perhaps over time we grow their comfort in sharing meaningful information with us, less the standard response and more like we're asking meatier questions, which we're hoping to get meatier responses that we're able to turn around in days versus weeks or months. And all of a sudden, we're acting on things in a different pace. So before, when an employee engagement survey went out once a year because it took us 4 months to assess the data, now you put the questions out, you get feedback in a week, you turn that feedback back to your executive leadership team within 5 days, and you come to some decision, and now you're taking action with employees in the next week. So now we've moved it from 4 months to 1 month. But now what happens with those other 3 months is really the core of the question. Perhaps what's happening with those 3 months in some companies, they're just going to fill it with a bunch more new initiatives. But perhaps with other companies, They're going to say, you know what? This data has told us that we need to do these three things, and we want to dig into them more before we take action. So we're going to run some conversation groups. We're going to teach our managers how to actually have those conversations with their employees so it doesn't all sit on one department. And we're going to actually start to have some reoccurring conversation and feedback loops around things that really matter. That's when I think about what's the purpose of are we really going to get time back? It is the time that as an HR executive, I always wanted. So many times, Jen, that I was like, oh, I want to get started on this week. And by the time you got there at 9 o'clock in the morning, you already had 15 emergencies on your desk. And you're like, another week goes by and I can't do it. That soft space of truly building inspired employee experiences, that I am going to go to the grave saying I think can be accomplished, but we have to get past the 1 and 2% of what AI can do. And that's where I think a lot of people struggle, is they're still at that, like, I'm using it to, it's creating my job descriptions and it's finishing my work, my memos and things like that, which is good stuff to do. It's a great learning space. But this year, I think we need to elevate.
Okay. Well, I'm going to press you a little bit on the leader. I'm going to go back to it. And, I'm still kind of wondering there's different sets of users, right? So someone who's using it, maybe the first step is polishing email, right? What could maybe be a second step or a third step that they could go into? Because it's clear from an HR perspective, from an organizational perspective, from any department that holds a lot of data, it seems to me like that a great use of it. And I'm a big proponent of AI. Love it, right? Use it all the time. But I'm still I think if a leader is listening, I don't know if they'd be like, okay, well, I already use it for email. What's next? So maybe what would be that next step for them to consider if they're like, yeah, cool, got it with emails?
I would start by figuring out what it's like to create some custom assistants. Then I would move into, how do I build automations? Then I would move into, as by the time they get there, like, how is agentic AI going to support, potentially change the way my business operates? I would let's take a look at the products and the systems that we're currently using. How can we leverage the data that we have more effectively through the use of AI and analytics? What tools can we get our team members to perhaps release in an exchange potentially for other tools? So I think there's a lot of steps to take post the email. I think where leaders need to first start, though, is really think organizationally. What is the conversation that our organization is having about AI? What conversation do I want to start having about it as a leader within my team, within my organization? I talk about this in every session. If you haven't done a just conversational listening tour with your employees with no risk of repercussion, no promises made, but just a literal conversation around, hey, I've been using AI to help me with my emails. Have you been trying it at all? What's that look like for you? Really open-ended conversation around it to get an understanding of, perhaps you have some real power users in your organization that could help others, or perhaps you've got an organization that you are, to your point, Jen, you really love it. Maybe you've got people like you that really love it and realize that nobody else in their organization has even explored it yet. If that is something that comes into mind for you, or you become aware of that, those are things you've got to ask yourself about how you're communicating, what your approach to AI is going to be as an organization.
Yeah, I love those questions, Theresa. Just those kind of level up and take a step back, right?
Yeah.
From the nitty gritty of the day-to-day, right? And say, what are the conversations that are happening? And it's just making me think of so many things. I use it all the time, but I'm not really thinking about, okay, am I asking these questions when I work with teams, when I work with leaders, so it's.
What do you use it all the time for, Jen?
I use it for show notes, for podcasts, for marketing is helpful. I do use it to polish my email sometimes. I do that a lot less, but there's been a few that I struggled with, and I was like, just polish this. Really marketing, because I'm not great at marketing, and I don't know if anyone actually reads show notes, but I know they need to happen with podcasts. So I use those all the time. And then, I've used one of your custom chat GPTs and I love it. It's like my new bestie next to Claude. So
Well, I
yeah.
think that's a great conversation to start with. Like, wow, I didn't realize you could use it for XYZ or, you know, oh, because you're using it for that, I also use it for this. And you're like, oh wow, I think that kind of sharing and collaboration around it, the socializing of it, I think that there are still a lot of people that are feeling, especially with organizations that aren't acknowledging its existence, feeling a little bit like they are cheating or shouldn't be using it or that they're going to be judged for sort of not doing their job. And so that's why I talk about not being so policy driven or being very open about the way you ask your questions, exposing your own usage first, making people feel comfortable so that there can be some sort of general acknowledgement that there do need to be some guidelines and guardrails for safety and security of yourself, your own information, the company, but in general that we should be leading with a mindset of curiosity around what could these tools be doing? How could we create a new onboarding experience or, use tools to create podcasts or on things that are important to us as a business, share our values in a unique and creative way, um, cascade our goals so that everybody feels, one of the things that I'm on a little bit of a tangent, Jen, but one of the things that we always used to do back, when I started in HR back in God knows when, 2020, we were talking even then about how do we create the marriage of people's own motivators with the jobs that they're expected to do. I mean, I wrote that into a managerial training literally back in 1992, 2022, 2002. And
2002. Is that what you're saying?
2002, yes, 2002. That's a new one. But we created this whole thing around like, how do we build this connectivity, right? People are more motivated if they're doing things that bring them joy and bring them a sense of happiness. Like, how do we create that link? AI can do that without a lot of the guesswork and a lot more accurately than we can. That's something I would tell a manager to do. Ask your employees, what are you motivated? Like, what motivates you? What gets you excited about this job? What gets you excited outside of this job? How can I tap into that with the work that you have to do? And then take that and cascade it through your organizational goals and objectives. My guess is you would see a lot greater participation and a lot greater focus on it.
Yeah. I was working with a team doing a workshop for them, and someone gave me back, had some pre-work, and someone gave me back one. I was like, this sounds like chat, but it's good. Like, and I acknowledged it. I said, did you put this in Chat GPT? And he was like, yeah. I was like, amazing. Like, it was really succinct what came out of it.
Yeah.
And then with another one, we're doing some work in the workshop, and it was a woman over 40. And I said, hey, have you used Claude yet? She's like, no, I haven't. So I sat her down and we walked through it and we put it in. But that was a leadership team. And so that was the one time recently that I kind of got a gauge of who was using what.
Mm-hmm.
And, no shame. I was like, this is amazing way to use it, right?
Yeah. We talked before we started about the fact that I'm teaching it. I teach at university. I teach both HR management as well as AI in business. And there's something we all as professionals are going to need to realize that, this new workforce that's going to be kind of flooding the workplace over the next few years is going to be very AI savvy and technology savvy. And they're gonna, we're all in university environment talking about how students leverage AI, how professors and teachers leverage AI, what that experience is going to be. And it feels like a long time from now. But, I look at my nephew who is 14. He has like 7, 8 years before he's graduating college. And the things that he can do are just exponentially more advanced in some ways, and in some ways a lot less. But in some ways,
Yeah. Well,
so much more advanced. And, what's hard to imagine today is what is the trajectory of our experience going to look like over the next 5 to 10 years, right? My whole thing is I don't want people to go into learning because they're afraid of it, because they're afraid of being left behind. Or, you mentioned before, this is probably not the greatest entree, but you mentioned jobs being lost. And there's the truth that jobs are going to be lost, that there are jobs that won't exist anymore. And
Absolutely.
what I say often is that we're still at the beginning of the runway for that. In a lot of cases, the runway's starting to get shorter because, as you see, Shopify and Duolingo and all the 15, I think it's 55, all these different companies are starting to announce that, we're going to expect that teams start looking at, can artificial intelligence support this before we hire another person? And I think that's such a challenging position to put both humans and the technology in, right?
Yeah.
If we're not training our teams on how to leverage it, how are they going to decide whether a computer or AI can support the business? Um,
Right.
I was just going to say that doesn't mean that we can stick our head in the sand and imagine it's not going to bring change. It is our time to make some visionary decisions and talk with our leaders about what impact they think and we think technology is going to have on their organizations, on the organizations.
Yeah. Well, a couple things there. Fun fact about my child. So he just turned 12. So when he was in 5th grade, he wrote this. It was a story through ChatGPT. It was ridiculously long. It kept repeating it. To me, it was obvious. His teacher's like, Ben wrote the best story. I was like, he used AI for that. She's like, oh, damn, he did. But yeah, it's happening. So like when your nephew's out looking for a job, when my son and my daughter, who's even younger, are going to go out in the world, there's no telling what jobs are going to be available, right? Like there really isn't. There's going to be new jobs, just as like YouTuber wasn't a job when we were in
Totally.
school, right?
Yeah.
Like that just wasn't a thing. Things evolve. But it sounded like you said, because we talked about that, A, it's going to save you time, but B, it may cost you your job eventually. And so what I heard from you is just to learn about it and start using it, understanding it. And then how could you leverage it, right? I think that
Yeah.
makes you a more valuable asset, and I hate to call people assets, but it's kind of
No, but it also makes you more in charge of what happens to your destiny, right?
Mhm.
There's the idea that if I don't learn about the bad news doesn't come, and that never happens. You know,
Mm.
right now, because focus so deeply on HR leaders, a lot of my conversation is we are standing in a position to look to the left and the right of us in our organizations, and we know, if you have, your managers should know if they have roles that are highly repetitive, highly task oriented, you know, logging information into a database or pulling things off of a database. Those are roles that are going to be, those are tasks that are going to be automated. And so, if that's the case, how are we looking at the individuals in those roles? And if we are people first and AI forward, then how are we looking at what the next phase of experience for that person is? And how do we actually have conversations with that person to say, hey, we're not talking about today, but I need to bring a difficult reality to your frame or view. And part of that may be that the tasks in your role become automated at some point. And when that point comes, I want us to be all on the same page about how you can still provide value with our company or with another company and how we're going to create a plan to help get you there. I mean, that's real people first. Let's talk about it now. Let's not wait until it's 6 months down the road. Um, because at the end of the day, I'd rather deal with it proactively than feeling like I'm, you know, causing harm or catching somebody unaware.
Right. Well, I guess it's also too from the perspective when I think of if I was leading a team and what I always appreciated about a team that would come to me and say, "Hey, this process doesn't make sense. Here's how I suggest improving it." So if people are constantly doing tasks that feel burdensome or there's a better way to do it, you want them to be able to speak up. Um,
Oh, yeah.
it, it helps everyone. And I can't imagine you'd be that excited about doing the same task over and over. Although we know there's people that like this is safety and a comfort. They like doing their job. But
There are a lot of people that like the repetition.
Mhm.
change is hard for everybody. It's especially if you've been in a role. I found this in one of my last positions where I joined a commercial real estate company. They have been around for over 100 years. They had approximately 65% of their employees had been in the same position for over 16 years.
Wow.
And they really liked the status quo. And now they had a new CEO that was coming in, taking over, and he had a lot of visionary, creative ideas. And there was a reality we needed to face. And people, I've had workshops where I had people that were at Mazda. I had a woman that was in her role in compliance for over 40 years. She could not have been more excited to learn about AI. And I've had people that have never touched AI before, new to the business, and have no interest in it. And it really, there is no age criteria, there is no role criteria. Um, but there is some real positives that can come from the curiosity of just exploring.
Yeah, I guess I feel like we're at the time in 2025. I don't feel like it's going to be an option much longer to put your head in the sand, like, or you're going to be using it and you don't even know you're using it somehow. It's like, you
Yeah.
know,
Yeah. Those that putting their head in the sand are just going to use whatever embedded tools are calling themselves AI and are really automation. Um, and then there are going to be others that are really taking the baton and running. And it's
yeah.
exciting to see what they come up with.
It is, like, the potential when I'm reading about some of the great things it can do in the medical world, like scanning
Mm,
things and finding disease faster. I mean, there are really good parts of it.
yeah.
But, when you think about leadership, it's a human role, right? Yes, of course, you're orchestrating the work of your team and really contributing to, the organization, but, a lot of the work is people-centered, right?
Yeah.
Um, if at least people first, organizations at least. But you know, what parts do you feel like can AI ever replicate that or, eh, duplicate that in any way? Because it feels like, of course, you need to rethink how everything's done
Mhm.
now with AI. But are there pieces of leadership that won't be able to be outsourced to AI?
I'm going to say I don't know. I think the desired answer is, of course. Of course, there are going to be human aspects of the way we relate, emotional intelligence, um, reasoning, things that, people want to say, absolutely, it can't do that. But I think it really depends on, I think there will, at least for the short term, still need to have human oversight over what it puts together, what it creates. But it's incredibly impressive. Its ability to improve in reasoning over the past year, its ability to influence people, sometimes in a not great way, in a terrible way. But again, I think what we're trying to do is we're trying to take something incredibly dynamic that is AI technology, and then we're trying to balance that with an even more dynamic and even more unique and individualistic humanity. And it's really hard to say that what it can and cannot do. It all really depends on who's using it, how they are using it, and how much they allow themselves to personalize that experience. I talk with people. I do not have an issue with humanizing my technology. Even though I may call it, give it unique names or talk very, you know, collegially to it. At the core of what I know is that it is a computer system. Um, it's an algorithm. It's mathematics and numbers and digits. That's what it is. But it helps me to, in my experience with it, to humanize it. Other people feel very differently, and every single individual is going to have a different perspective based on the tool they're using, based on the experience they've had, and based on how they relate to things. And so it's a tough question. I think it's getting better and better. Initially we're in this space where most people are using it for, you're having to prompt it in questioning, you're having to ask it to take action. We're very close to a future where it can perhaps act on its own. And I think there's a lot of fear in that.
Yeah, have you ever seen the show Person of Interest?
Yeah.
That's what it reminds me of. The
Yeah.
machine's gonna take us over, and we're gonna have to destroy it. So there
Yeah.
is, like, this I can go down this really, like, scary path of it's gonna be smarter than us, and that's just where it's
It already is
trending.
smarter than us. It just can't do anything on its
No.
own.
To
It
start
can't be
yes.
it can eventually the question is always require it to have power is gonna be the thing. Always require it to have something we can unplug. That's maybe the goal, right? Like,
Yes.
but it already is. I mean, that's crazy. It's not smarter than us, just the capability of navigating through such volumes of information. We can't our brains can't even comprehend
Yeah.
what it's actually doing.
Yeah,
And that's
and it
both the excitement and the reason to stay, to follow people like myself. I'm on LinkedIn. If you're at all curious, I'd love to connect with anybody, any of your listeners. But I try to pretty frequently share updates, insights, ways to use it, ways to leverage it. Um, my book goes through that a lot because I do think the more we know about it, and it's changing every day, but the more we know, and if you don't know anything today, what a great day to start,
yeah.
right?
Theresa, if you've given us some tips, so I don't think I need to ask you this, but I just wanna make sure, for a middle manager listening who's like, "I need to go start with AI tomorrow." Like, this is
Yeah.
start what is their starting part? You gave a bunch, like, I've got it here, build a custom tools. The next step after emails is the first step, just polishing their emails. What would be the very first step?
The very first thing I would do, and I tell this to anybody, is I would put ChatGPT on my phone, on my iPhone. For me, I set the like ready active button. I have the iPhone 16. I think this feature was available with the 15. But there's this ready access button, or you can just upload the app. And the thing I would do is if I've never used it before, every morning I would wake up and I would just open it as I was getting ready for my day and just ask a question about something you're interested in, about management, about your company, about competitors, about AI, about a hobby that you're interested, a trip you plan to take, whatever it is, just ask questions and start a dialogue with it. You can do that vocally. You don't have to type it in, although you can if you want. Even if you talk to ChatGPT, it will save your conversation. All of these tools are different. I think ChatGPT is probably the best one to start with, and it still remains my favorite, even though I do like some others. The the functionality just continues to grow so much more rapidly under ChatGPT. The humanistic language is really rivaling what Claude can do, and it's going to continue at least for now. I like that it continues to provide provides visualizations, it provides imagery. So there are a lot of creative ways that you can explore it, even if it's not about work. Like to me, I think that's the best way to start. Like
Mhm.
ask it about travel plans, ask it to help you identify a great place to take your partner for your anniversary dinner. Things that you just would normally Google. Start using generative AI and see how you feel about the responses. Then, to your point, Jen, try a few different ones. Try Claude.ai, try Gemini, try Copilot, try Perplexity. There's these different tools that you can try and see which one you like the answers from.
Yeah, I have a colleague, a friend of mine who, planned her whole Disney vacation using
Yeah.
AI. So, yeah, I mean,
So
for some
I have
reasons outside of work.
Yeah, I have so just for really research and for my business, I have the pro version, which gives me access to Operator, which is an agentic tool. I have used it to literally, I'll say, my husband and I are going out to dinner. We need a restaurant in this area, Michelin star. I want you to find it, book it. And it literally, you can see it opening the tabs, doing the search, looking for the Michelin stars, doing, and then it says, "Is this, are you it needs your phone number, it needs this." You provide that and it's off and it makes the reservation. Like there's a future where, Sam Altman came out a few days ago and said he imagines a future. He's the CEO for anybody who doesn't know, CEO of OpenAI, which owns ChatGPT and created ChatGPT. He talked about a future where we will be kind of, he sees a world where we have things constantly being recorded, the things that we do, and that it serves as a personal assistant for us with the security that we would need and feel comfortable with, but can access. I know for me, I'm getting for my birthday, my 51st, I'm getting the Meta glasses. I'm very excited about that. And we'll see how that goes. But I think just for your managers that are starting, start simple. Don't let your skull get held back because you feel like you're not already ahead. There's no better place than just ask it a simple question.
Well, Theresa, is there anything that I did not ask you that you want to leave the listeners with?
Really only how to work with me. I think that for companies that are looking or individuals that are looking for ways to understand how to leverage it, how to leverage AI tools, how to bring it into their organization, thoughtfully. And with that, as I say, people first, AI forward mindset, just getting in touch with me through LinkedIn or through my website, peoplepower.ai. I'd love to connect with anybody. And I really, really appreciate the time, Jen. It's been great.
Yeah. Awesome. I'll link all of that up in the show notes. But Theresa, thanks so much for your time. I appreciate it.
Oh, it's been so great, Jen. Thank you so much for the afternoon chat with a little sprinkle of sunshine coming in.
There you go. We made it just under an hour.
Yes.